Hello there, Inky Fingers here from Inky Fingers Architectural Art. Now today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. As you can see, I've got a really rather nice picture of a Scottish castle. Now castles of course are still architecture, so they're very viable on this channel. Now the original picture or the original photograph was much wider. It had a lot more landscape around it, so I've just zoomed in, cropped in on the castle area to make the castle the point of interest. Now of course, as you can see in this photograph, we've got this nice sort of mountain in the background, which we can do nice and pale to give a bit of depth into the picture, and which that should also, when we paint in the castle should be very sharp in contrast with the paler background. And we've got some nice sunlit greenery, which is quite nice. Now I've already drawn the castle on a just smaller than A4 sheet of ash rough. The pencil drawing was done with a Caran d'Ache Technograph 3H pencil. Now I like the H graphite pencils because they are very hard, so it doesn't smudge on the paper as a HB or a B pencil would, especially if you're drawing things on rough paper. It can become a little bit of a mess. You don't get this problem with H graphite. And of course, with the H or the hard graphite, the lines are sharper and they are fainter than HB or B, 2B, anything like that. Now the order of the day, I think, for this picture is I'm going to paint the picture first and then put the ink on afterwards. And the ink is going to be with my good old Lamy Safari fountain pen with an extra fine nib. Fantastic pens, very fluid, very smooth, and for the price they are brilliant. Now, as I've said, I'm going to be painting the watercolour first and then putting the pen afterwards. Of course, there's two ways you can do this, what I've just said, or the other way is putting the pen first and then when it's all inked in, then putting the watercolour over it. But you can have two very different looking pictures depending on which way you want to do it. Now if you put the pen first, all drawn in, and then put the watercolour washes over, you do tend to make it look like a colouring in book. Everything is very neat and distinct, which is nice, but some people might think it looks a bit static. But if you do it the other way, like I'm going to do it, and it's all drawn in in pencil, as you can see, then all we need to do is do the watercolour, and then when it's dry, get the pen out and then do the inking over the watercolour washes. When you do it this way, you could, if you wish, be a little bit more free with the pen, a little bit more scribbly, and what that'll do, it'll give it a lot more life, a lot more freedom and looseness to the picture. So that's enough of me wattling on about it. So let's get down to this picture. So to start this picture off, start with the sky, because that is the background element. And I'm going to try a paint I've just bought the other day, and this is called it's Jackman's Summer Clouds. It's a sort of a cool blue, but it's a granulating colour, and this is what I got it for. So I'm going to use this for the first time. Now because this picture is quite well, not complicated, but quite full, is a lot of landscape, only a tiny bit of sky, so we cannot have a complicated sky. So I'm going to do this very simplistic, the sky, with this Jackman's new colour. So I'm going to just pull it across, just like so, and then put my brush in some water and then just pull it down a bit. Just to make it looks like you might have a few little clouds there. Just blend that in. We can go over the top of the mountain, but trying to keep the building free of any colour. Now really what I should have done is put some masking fluid over this. So right, that will do. Now I'm just going to put some more paint on the water on the brush and just drag that in. So I'm getting it's getting fainter and fainter, the blue. So we're not going to have any sort of hard lines. And that will do. Because it's rough paper and it's a sable brush, you do get these nice little chinks of light, which can be cloud. So now the sky is dry. You can see it's just a nice sort of a Scottish sky. Perfect. Looks like we've got some clouds here and there. It's very, very simple. Now we can paint in a wash for the distant mountain. Now we don't want this really detailed or too dark because we want to keep it in the background. So we've got this sort of light browny colour, and we're going down into the trees, or these fir trees in the foreground. So what I've done for the background, I've mixed up some raw sienna and I've put some of this new blue in to cool it down. And then for the trees in the foreground, I've mixed another Jackman colour I bought. I bought it at the same time as this one, but this is called a Jade green, and again it's a granulating colour. So slightly, for a green, it's still light, but it's more of a cool green than the other greens you could get. So I've mixed that and that to cool it down, and that can go in for these trees in the foreground. So it's not going to be too detailed. You've got to be very careful around here. That is the only thing. Really, I should have put masking fluid over this, the building. But if we're careful, it should be fine. Now I'm just pulling the brush strokes down this way, so any little gaps we get, it's going to show the fall of the land, which is going down. We don't want it this way because that would mean the fall of the land is that way, going horizontal. We want it vertical. So cut around there, just go around here. These little light areas and this rough paper, doesn't matter, they look really nice because they can be bits of rocks or whatever. Just do that, we don't want this drying. And as we get down here, let's just go into this green. Now I'm just going to put a few little sticks of green up into there. Let's get some green around here. A little bit there. Be careful cutting around this, which is quite nice because the green's darker than, it's going to be darker than this colour of the foreground. Just drag. This is a number 6 rigger actually, Klinsky sable. I'm using. I could have used a larger brush, but I'm not, because I like the way this just really drags across the rough paper. I'm going to now put a little bit more blue into this mix. It's just going to darken it up a little bit more, just for the foreground. Remember, this will dry lighter anyway. And we can see the granulation forming because these are granulating colours, and this is why I'm using these colours, of course. This is more like different kinds of trees in the foreground, so I think I will just leave that like so. We can do some trees there later on. Now this part, I've got some green there. I'm just going to go back into this colour and just modify this a bit so it's not green all the way down. It's changing back to maybe it's a bit of dry grass or rock or whatever. Cut in there, cut in there. Just cut into that a bit just to make these, the tops of these trees, what are going to be trees. And that's it, we'll leave it as that. So it will dry a bit lighter, so I should push it back a bit. Now for the next part, we're going to be painting in the castle itself. So this is all dry. Now the castle, we can see is very light. It's like, so I'm going to be using I think, some Naples yellow, and then in that just mixing up some slightly different colours. Maybe it's maybe it's a burnt umber, or this looks like it's a bit of burnt sienna. These type of colours just to make it look like a nice warm stone colour. So I can actually do this with the full paint the full lot in with this one colour, because we can then just paint over it other subsequent washes and as glazes to make it different colours, different shades. So just drag it down, scrubbing it in, make use of the roughness of the paper. Now I've just put a tiny bit of burnt sienna into the mix. I'm just going to go over here and there where I think it needs. I'm not really copying much of this. I'm just putting it in where I think it could do with. Now this is some raw sienna. These in the foregrounds are just rocks that are by the loch shore. Now for these foreground trees here, I'm just going to use the original mix, but I've just put a little bit of azo yellow light in, which is like an equivalent of lemon yellow. And so what this is going to do is to make it much more brighter, a lot more like sunny. So I'm just going to go over the tops of the trees here, like so, and then dampen the bottom bits so it sort of blurs them in to the ground. Now for the remaining parts of the picture that is not painted yet, this is going to be the grass in the foreground and on these rocks here. I'm just going to use a nice bright green, which is just basically the green here with the azo yellow light put in, quite a lot of it, so it's going to be much brighter. And then we'll just drop it in, and again using the roughness of the paper to form the texture. for the darker areas, same colour, but I've just put some ultramarine blue just to give a little bit. It could be shading, shadow or whatever, but it's just to give it a two-tone type of effect. Be careful in the archway. Now I'm specifically doing it darker just down here at the bottom, because this part of the picture is much lighter than there, so dark against light, it's going to be dark against light. So I'm just going back into the original mix I had for the lighter area of here, and then just drag that across. Now I'm dragging it across horizontally because it's grass, and grass is, when you look at it like this, grass is flat. So we can paint it left to right. And now we let that dry. Now the only part that's unpainted now is a little bit of the loch there, and it's a little bit of land just here. So the water is just the blue I did for the sky, and I put a touch of just a speck of manganese just to lighten it up slightly, just so it's the same sort of colour as the sky, so it marries up. And as for this, it's like a little bit of beach really. I'm just going to use the colour I painted for the castle, and I just put a little bit of colour there, just like so. So now it's all covered in with paint. We can now start to put some secondary washes on it to add some detail. And going back to the castle, we can see that it does have stronger darks in it, a lot stronger than I've done. So what I'm going to do is I've just mixed some French ultramarine and some raw sienna. It's going to give this sort of a dark, muddy, sort of browny grey colour, which is, I think, quite nice for this castle. And I've switched to a smaller, it's a number 2 rigger. So what I can do with this, because it's a rigger, I can sort of drag it off across and get some nice, hopefully dry brush across this rough surface paper. So what I'll do here is we need to darken up the roof. Now just leave a few little gaps, little lines, just to give an indication of there could be tiles there, because of course it's far too far away to actually show any detail. But we can at least try and just simulate a little bit. But what's important is to get this chimney very, very sharp, because that's light against the dark. And then for the rest of the building, I'm just going to see if I can just dry brush a little bit of texture across. Just dampen it out with a bit of clean water here and there. Now this is the stage with a little bit of texture completed. We will put a little bit more on. but we've got a little bit of texture in the castle. We've got a little bit of shape showing through of these bits that are jutting out. We've got to put all the shadows in, of course, but now we've got to let that dry again. Now the picture's dry again, but it's looking very, very bland. It's got texture, it's got some colour, but what I want to do now is to stick some tonal values in. So I'm going to go and put the shading in, the shadows, on the castle itself. So we see the sun is coming up from the right, coming down, so everything on the left is in shadow. We can put some shading on the grass and whatever, just to give it a little bit of oomph, so to speak. So I've just mixed up, it's going to be a sort of a dull purple colour, the shadow. Not too warm, not too cool. And I'm using the number 6 rigger again. I'm just going to everywhere where there is everything that's on the left hand side is going to be in shadow. Now the foreground has got some more texture work in. Doesn't really need much more than that, I don't think. We do have to do something on the background. Not much, because there is a little bit of tonal variations within the background, the mountain. This is a little flat, so we've got to suggest where the sun is and get some shape into the background. So again, I'm just going to use I was just sort of this colour with a little bit of the shadow colour here mixed in, quite weak, and I'm just going to sort of use the dry brush and try and get a little bit of modelling into this background mountain. Just like that, doesn't need to be much, not much, that will do. And then same here with the foreground. Now this is just a slightly darker mix. I've just put some of this colour in with the colour I used for this, and I'm just going to again just very lightly using the brush. Look at a long holder. I'm not holding the brush like that, I'm holding the brush like that, and I'm using the side of the brush to scrape along the paper. And because this is like a rigger, a natural hair rigger, it will sort of scrape along and give some nice textural details. Again, I think that'll do there. Right, now it's all dry again. I'm just going to go back into the castle and using an even smaller brush. Now, this is nothing special. It's just, I think it's a Daylon synthetic brush. It's a number 1, very small, because this is now just going to be for some little marks, as you can see, just individual stones or whatever we need to put into this, just to give it a bit more texture. So all I'm going to do is something like that, just little marks, just to make it look like there's some stonework in the parts you can see. Now I've put some little marks here and there just to give an indication of that some bricks in, but looking at the back of the mountains, We can see some little crevices and such, so I'm just using the same brush. I'm just putting very fine lines here and there, just in the way the mountain's falling, just to give a little bit of shape to it. It's not really detailed as such, it's just a bit of direction. Now again, on the castle, we need to be putting some windows in. So the windows will be painted in just with the small brush again, the number 1 round, and with a mixture of ultramarine blue and a little bit of carbon black. Right, I've done a little bit more work on it. I've just darkened some shading up a little bit more. I put a touch more tonal values in the background mountains, just to give it a little bit more definition as it's going down, and a touch more dry brush in the foreground, just to make it look like there's really a lot of forest trees as they are. And I put a little glaze of very weak Naples yellow over the castle. So now that's done, it's time to put some pen on. And as I said, I'm going to be using the Lamy Safari, and what you really need to do here is to just basically go over it. Be neat as you like, or be scruffy as you like. Put some emphasis into the structure, into the shape of it, and see what happens. So we start from this here, and I'm just going to, now I'm holding the pen near the middle of the shaft. I'm not holding it down here. You get more freedom up here. Now I've just been doing a little bit of work on it, not too much. It's basically we've got some splattering, well, a lot of splattering on the background mountains, and some on the grass here and on the castle itself, to give it some texture without having to put lots and lots of little bricks in. The splattering does the trick. I've just softened off the back of this mountain here so it blends into the background a little bit, because it was a little bit too hard. And I've just put a few more little bits of line, just as I'm doing now, just to give a little bit of texture to the grass. And this is where really you can go back over it with the pen in places and just make some of the lines heavier. And give it a little bit more oomph, as the saying would go. A few little marks here and there, just from a distance. It just looks like it could be a few extra darker stonework here and there. It looks pretty strange up close with all these little marks, but in the end, step back, it sort of does merge together. See, it's just scribbles really. We could do just the tiniest little bit in the background with the pen, just for these trees. But really don't want to do much at all. So the window frames, or the windows, don't have any frames in as such, and as you can see on the larger window frames, so we can just use a gel pen and just put a few indications of window frames. So this is the finished picture. We've got a lot of detail, a lot of texture in the picture. The background hill, or the background mountain in this case, it's kept more pale, but there is still shading in, it's texture. There's texture in the trees going up the mountain, mainly because of the splatter I've put on, which splatter always gives good texture without doing really anything, and of course the dry brush on rough paper. The castle itself, again, it's got a lot of splatter on it to give the impression that it's lots of bricks. The pen work, I haven't gone as free as I thought I would. I didn't think it really needed it in the end. But it does, the pen does bring it all together. It gives it that sort of illustrative style, which I quite like. The darks have pen cross-hatched just to give that illustrative look, that texture with the pen. Even though we could have just left it as just the dark washes, what I originally put on, but you can still see the dark washes, but the pen just adds texture to it. The grass, again, is dry brush over a rough textured paper and lots of splatter with various values of ink, of watercolour paint. And a simple sky, and it's your typical Scottish castle. And it's something that didn't really take that long to do because of the simple washes. So I hope you enjoyed this little demonstration. It was a really fun one to paint. It's more like a pen and wash watercolour type sketch than a completely finished picture. But these type of things sometimes can look better than a completely finished, worked out picture. It's got a lot more freeness about it. Now if you'd like to see more of this type of thing, then if you haven't subscribed, then consider giving me a subscription. It's all free, and just ring that bell icon so you get a notification and you don't miss anything. And also put a little comment in the comments box. And so until next time, I'll see you again. So until then, goodbye.